Today's video is a little extra special. I picked up these beautiful beads from our wonderful friend Colleen and designed a spiral stitch necklace using the fire polish, seed beads, and these stunning dandelion focal beads. So let's jump right on in and start weaving. Start off with our 6mm fire polish beads. The great thing about this necklace though is that if you don't have these exact colors or these exact products, you can always use whatever is in your stash. 6mm beads, 8mm beads, any type of focal. It could be something similar to this, it could be something that's completely different than that. Just, it's one of those very versatile type of projects. That's why I decided to do this one. So the first thing we're going to do is pick up one of our 8/0 beads. We're going to use this as a stop bead. So pull it all the way down to the end of your thread and leave enough to where you can have a good amount to be able to tie it off at the end. Go back through that bead one more time. You can go back through it twice if you want to, but I usually just do it once. And then that puts our little bead at the end, so that way we can string our beads on and go on from there. We're going to start off first by putting on 2 of our 6mm fire polish. We're then going to pick up an 8/0, and then it was 9 of our 11/0s. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then one more 8/0. So an 8/0, 9 11s, and another 8. And then pull that all the way down to your stop bead down here. Now we wanted to make sure that we added plenty of beads, so that way when you wrap this around like that, the beads will sit along the side of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back through the 2 fire polish beads that we added. We're going to skip that stop bead. We're not going to be using that just yet. And then we pull it down tight like that. And we want those beads, the seed beads, to sit off to the side like they're doing at the moment. Now the first thing that you do, or the next step that you do on the spiral stitch, is you want to move these beads over to the left or to the right. Now I typically bead, I'm right-handed, so I usually move all my beads over to the left. If you're left-handed, you can move all your beads over to the right. Your spiral will just go in the opposite direction of what I'm showing. So in the next step in the spiral stitch is to add one more of our fire polish beads. So the fire polish are basically the core beads, and then the seed beads are going to be the ones that are going to be off to the side with the decoration. Then we're going to add our decoration, which is 1 of our 8s, 9 of our 11s. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and one more 8. Now we're always going to go through the same amount of fire polish beads whenever we do the next stitch. So that first one we went through the first 2 fire polish beads. This next one we're going to count downwards and figure out where our fire polish that we're going to go through next. So this is the first one, then this is the second one. So we're going to go through the second and the third fire polish that are in line. Then when you get that pulled down, it will probably sit something similar to that. And then that's when we take those seed beads and push it off to the right, or to the left, my other right. And then it looks like that off to the side. So I'm going to do this stitch one more time, and then I'll let you finish it off. So 1 of our 6mm fire polishes, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 1. And then 1 of our 8s, 9 of our 11s, 1 of our 8s. Pull this all down to the product, go through the last 2 fire polishes that are in line, and just those fire polishes. Don't go back through any of the seed beads. Pull the seed beads down, and then flip it off to the left. Just like that. So if you're using the same counts as I am, then you'll want to do 2 more of your 6mm fire polish. Once you get those last 2 on, come back and I'll show you how to transition from the 6mm to the 8mm. Once you have your 6 fire polish polish beads on, the 6mm ones at least. Now it's time to transition into the 8mm. So the process is going to be very similar. Pick up some of my 8s over here. We're going to pick up one of our 8s. To begin with, we're going to pick up one of the 8s, and then we're going to pick up the same amount of seed beads. So one of the 8/0 seed beads, and then 9 of our 11s. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and one more 8. So the seed bead portion on this first part is going to be the same. Pull that down, and then you go back through the last 2 fire polish again. So you're going to go through the 8mm and then that last 6mm. And then just do the same thing. Push the beads off to the side. And when you do that, it should look something similar to that. If you noticed, some of my beads were kind of doing this. That's going to happen with the necklace. That's part of the way the stitch is going to just behave whenever your necklace is done. So it's probably not going to sit exactly like this. It's going to end up going around like that sometimes. But that's just part of the stitch. That's why I like using the stitch, because it looks very organic that way. Alright, so then this next one we're going to add another 8mm. Now your counts are going to change a little bit from now on when you're using the 8s until you transition back from the 8s back to the 6s again. So we're going to pick up one of the 8mm fire polish, one of our 8/0 seed beads, 4 of our 11/0 seed beads. Then we're going to pick up a 6mm fire polish. Wow, that's hard to say. 4 more of our 11s, and then one of our 8s. So that is the pattern for the side of this one. So our core bead is still going to be one of the fire polishes. We're just using the smaller fire polish now in the decoration. So go through the last 2 beads there again. So this is going to be your first 2 of your 8mm beads. And then when you get that all pulled down, see if I can get everything to go correctly like that. So you can kind of see what it looks like when they're all twisted or up close to each other. And then that's the first one. So I'll do that one more time. And we're going to end up doing a total of 5. We're going to do a total of 5 of our 8mm in this little section. So I'll do one more of the big ones. So 8mm, an 8/0 seed bead, 4 11s, a 6mm fire polish, 4 more 11s, and then an 8/0 seed bead. Pull that down, and then go through your last 2 8mm fire polish. On this project, though, you want to make sure that your tension is always pretty tight. It doesn't you don't want it to be too loose, because you don't want to see too much thread in between each of your fire polish core beads here. So try to keep it as tight as you can, but not too tight to where it won't be able to move around and things like that. So go ahead and complete this section to where you have a total of 6 of your 8mm fire polishes. Then meet me back and I'll show you how to transition to your focal beads. Now that you have 5 of your 8mm fire polishes on, it's time to add one of your focal beads. Now if your focal bead has a top and a bottom like this one does, this is the top of the flower if you're not familiar with a dandelion. That is the top of the flower, and then the stem would be the bottom of the flower. And it's the same on both sides when you flip it over to the other side too. So there is an actual top and a bottom to it. Well, right now we're doing our necklace like this, so we want to make sure that our bead is going to be facing in the correct direction. Now if you're using a bead that doesn't really have a top and a bottom, then this part doesn't have to, it won't be that big of a deal. But we're going to go from the top to the bottom of the focal bead, so we can keep the orientation of it in the correct way. And then to continue on, we're going to pick up 2 more of our 8mm fire polish beads. We're going to pull all of this down just so you can see what it's going to look like. And then your seed bead should sit kind of on top of the focal bead a little bit. See how it's kind of sitting up against it? That's perfectly fine. So now we're going to add another row of our decoration beads like we would if we were just continuing on without that focal sitting there. And then 1 6mm, 4 more of these, and one of these guys. And then when we pull that down, we want to go back through the last 2 fire polishes again. And this part can be a little bit difficult because, as you can see, my tension is really loose at the moment. So just take your time and just make sure that everything gets down to the beads, just like that, so you don't see that much thread paths in between everything. Then move your beads, your decoration beads, off to the side, and then you would just continue on. So this portion that we're doing right now is actually going to be the middle of the necklace. So we're going to do a total of 6 of our 8mm beads. Then you're going to add on another one of your focals. This time, after you get your 6 8mm focal beads and put those in the center, then you're going to have to make sure that you're going from the bottom to the top of the next focal bead. So that way the one that's sitting over here on to the right of the necklace will be facing upwards. So you're going to go from the bottom to the top on that one. And then you're going to do the same thing on this side. You'll do 5 more of your 8mm and then 6 of your 6mm. And then once you're done with that, meet me back and I will show you how to finish off the necklace. I wanted to come back right before we get done with the necklace just to do a little reminder. When you're going from your last of your 8mm fire polish and going down to the next 6mm fire polish as your core beads, don't forget that we're going to the 8/0 seed bead, 9 of the 11s, and then another 8/0. And then that's going to be your decoration beads. So then go back through your 8mm and your 6mm fire polish, and then flip that off to the side. So don't forget that that would be where you would add your first of your, just the seed beads as your decoration off to the side. And then you would add your next 6mm and so on and so forth. And so you get 6 of your 6mm here at the end. So go ahead and finish that little portion and I will meet you back. When you get to the end of the necklace, your necklace should look something similar to this. And so we have our little dandelions facing the correct direction and then all of our beads on either side. So I'm going to actually end the bead woven portion of the necklace now. You can absolutely continue on with the spiral stitch and just using your core beads as your 8/0s, and just add a couple of 8/0s and then just your amount that you would use on either side of for your decoration and everything. The amount of the 11/0s would change just a little bit. So absolutely one of those things that you could do if you wanted to. Now the other thing I'm going to show you also here in just a second is, if you don't like it like that your spiral necklace is kind of doing that and you want it to stay more in an actual spiral like this, I'll show you an extra little step that you can do to keep that from, or keep your necklace looking like that. To finish off the necklace though, we're going to go ahead and add one more 8/0, so that way the 8/0 is going to look, or the one end is going to look similar to our beginning. Now we're going to go back through, all the core beads here. The reason for that, and I'm pretty sure you'll probably notice this too, is look how loose our beads are here in the center. Our little focal beads. So they're pretty loose, and there's only one strand of thread through each one of those beads. I don't like to do any type of project with only one strand through most of the main beads. I feel like it just doesn't, it's not as stable. So I like to put at least 2 strands, if not 3, if I can get 3, depending on how big the bead is. So, alright, so after you put that 8/0 on, we're essentially just going to go straight back down all through the core beads, come back out over here off to this 8/0, and then try to come back. I'm not sure if I'm going to have enough thread to be able to come back a second time, but that's my intention, is to get back over here and then tie off. So to do that, you just go straight down all the core beads. Now I'm going to stop here for a second and show you how to do that extra little step if you would like. And like I said, this will be a step that you can do to connect all of your decorations on the sides of your beads, of your core beads, to keep them in that spiral look. So just go down your first 2 core beads, come out through that 8/0 that's sitting right there, right next to that core bead. And then here you just have to figure out, okay, look at the next decoration beads and see which one of the 11-ohs is closest to the 8-oh. And I'll just put one right there. Am I going in the right direction? Yeah, I am. Okay. So you just go through there, and then you go back up through the 8-oh here, and then that attaches those two together. Now, how do you get back down to your core beads? Go back up through the same thread path here, but we're going to go to the bead to the right of the bead that we just went through. So the thread path is still going to be the same, but we're going towards the end of this side of the necklace. And when you do that, go through your 8-oh, and then now you're set to go back down the core bead again. So now we're going to put some more thread paths through the core bead. And then come back out. And then now make sure all your beads are situated in the correct way. And then you would go back up that next 8-oh that's sitting right there. And then just figure out which one's closest to where your 8-oh is at right now. You can always count your beads and make sure you go through the same bead if you want to. You could just do it just by guessing if you want to, just whichever one that you prefer. Then go back up through the decoration 11-ohs towards the end of this side of the necklace, through your 8-oh, and then back down the next two core beads. So that is how you would connect your spiral stitches together. And I may go ahead and finish the necklace just like that. And that way I can add a little extra thread. So I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way down to the other end. Now when you get to the other end, all you're wanting to do is just go back through this stop bead that we used one more time. And then I'm going to end up back over here off to this side, so that way I can get two thread paths through this bead that we just added on this end. So I'm going to go connect all my spiral stitches together through the cord beads, go back through our stop bead over here, then I'm going to go straight back through all the core beads, end up back over here off to this side, and then I'm going to tie off. So I will meet you back in a few seconds, and it'll be a couple minutes. Once you get your beadwork portion done, and you get all of your decorations on the edges all connected, if that is something that you want to do, then your necklace should look something similar to this. So it's looking pretty cool. I wasn't planning on doing the connections, connecting the edges and everything, but once I kind of showed you all how to do it, I thought, well, you know what, I'll go ahead and finish it out like that. So I think it turned out really nice. So at the end, I just went back through a couple of the beads, made a couple of half-hitch knots and a couple of surgeon knots, and then tied off. Then I went back over to the stop thread, and I did the same thing, and just tied off on that end. Now I've already made this little portion of the rest of the necklace, so I'll show you how to make the remaining of it. So I ended up cutting off about 12 inches or so of our wire off the spool. So we're going to start off making this little small little loop first, because it's the easiest of the two. So we're just going to put one of, oh, my camera just flashed. Hopefully that didn't do anything weird to the recording. But we're going to put the crimp tube on, and then we're going to move this down to the end of the wire. And depending on your comfort zone as far as how you hold your wire to crimp and everything, you may have to do just a little bit more than 12 inches. I accidentally cut off 12 inches because I wanted 3 inches on either side, and I was trying to figure out the total amount of inches to cut off, and I cut off 12 without thinking about it first because I was trying to cut off one side at a time, but that's okay. So 12 to 14 inches, something like that. So get your crimp tube in the middle of your magical crimpers and then squish down. Try to turn it about 90 degrees or so while still maintaining it into the crimper, and then squish down, and then continue to squish and turn until you can notice that there is no more resistance. When that is the case, Make sure I'm not going too fast with this. Yep. I'm not getting... See how mine's still kind of flat? It's still kind of wonky looking. I'm not getting it turned well enough in the crimpers. So if that happens, that's all it is that you're just not getting it turned well enough in the crimper. So you just have to kind of take it back out, put it back in, and then keep going. And eventually it'll work itself out. So looks much better that way. Alright, so now we're going to cut off that little bit of an excess. And then this amount is such a small amount, I'm just going to, oh, come on now, cut. There it goes. I'm just going to throw that little part away. I like to try to keep my little parts, but that one's quite small. Now I'm going to add our second color of our 8-O's. Now I counted, it's about approximately 13 of the Miyuki 8-O's per inch. So I have 36 of these out, and I've already pre-counted them, so that way you don't have to listen to me count to 36. But I'm just stringing these on. You don't have to use 8-O's or any type of seed beads. You can even use the yellow ones if you wanted to continue the yellow color up. I felt like the yellow was a little too bright, and I wanted the focal portion to be down here at this part of the necklace rather than up around closer to the neck. So I decided to go with a second color of the 8-O's, and this is just the Montana blue color, where the 11-O's that we used was the Montana blue gold luster. So it's a similar color. So once you get about 3 inches or so strung on here, our total end of our necklace is going to be somewhere around 16 to 17 inches is what I'm shooting for, at least. Go ahead and put your crimp tube on. This side we're going to go ahead and add the clasp. I have an extender chain over here. I have just some extra chain that's in my stash, and then I have these cute little heart charms, and I decided to use the gunmetal in the chain and the charm just to kind of go along with the darker colors and everything down here, rather than using the silver. So whichever one that you're doing, add that on. For me it'll be the lobster clasp. Then we're going to go back through, oh come on. We're going to go back through that crimp tube eventually. There we go. Then we're going to pull it down. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to make sure that the wires are not crossed in the crimp tube. So I'm holding on technically to the left hand side of the loop and then pulling down with the right hand side to make the loop a little bit smaller. Now you don't want this loop to be too small, but you also want it to be just about the same size as the loop that's over here. Hopefully you could see that. I have sunlight glaring through right now. It's kind of hard for me to see my little screen. And then we're going to take our crimper. Just make sure that your crimper is far enough away from your seed beads so you don't accidentally crimp or crack your seed beads. And then just crimp down. And then turn it in your crimper and crimp down and do the same thing that we did on the other end. You just want to make sure, I don't think I finished that sentence earlier, you want to make sure that the loop on this side with the lobster clasp and or your extender chain, if you choose to use an extender chain, is big enough to where your lobster or the chain can still kind of move around some. You don't want it to be too tight. Actually, that little crimp looks pretty good right now. So now we're going to cut off the excess of this, and at this time, it is now assembly time. This one is a good size to keep, so that one I'm going to keep. The other one was a little too small. Now we're going to take one of our 4mm jump rings. I always suggest to go through your 8-0 first. It's usually a lot easier to go through the 8-0. Now what I'm doing is I'm moving the 8-0 to where it's sitting on top of the bead like that, so it's easier to go through. Just make sure you're going through this 8-0 and not the 8-0 that's on the decoration side. So I always suggest to go through the 8-0s first, and then you add whatever it is that you're going to be adding on. And in this case, it's going to be the little small loop down here in the bottom, and then just close that up. And try not to throw it across your desk like I almost did. I love it when that happens. Especially when I'm working with seed beads and crystals really close to each other, it makes me jump every time because I'm afraid I'm going to end up breaking something. Alright, so that is closed. And then once you get your other side on, then you have a completed necklace. So I will put it together real quick and try to see if I can get it on camera. And of course I will have a better picture of it, which you probably have already seen in the very beginning. And you'll see another picture of it here in just a few seconds. So here is our Tennessee Wish necklace. And here's the finished Tennessee Wish necklace. I love how the spiral stitch really lets the fire polished beads and the dandelion focal beads shine. Be sure to check out Colleen's Etsy shop. Information is down below. And let me know in the comments, what would you pair this design with?